right, well, sure. First off, good morning. Full day put you out here, but I'm sure the spirit is what we're trying to do. It makes it kind of fun. You know, just walking around the ballpark on my way over here, it was like just the energy of people in the band is sort of amazing. It's always striking because it is sort of ironic. Every time we have our winter warm-up, it actually always becomes wintry. You think about the last 6 or 7 weeks here, it hasn't been too bad, but it hasn't disheartened anybody. I think the energy here is amazing, and I think it's going to be a really fun weekend. And when you think you couple it with our warm-up, you couple it with our caravans, and then the writers' dinner, it makes for just putting the St. Louis Cardinals back on the map. I think we all enjoy that. We're excited about it. And so it's going to be a nice weekend, and looking forward to seeing some faces I haven't seen in a while, and hopefully being able to chat with some players as well. So that'll be great. You know, just to touch on a little bit on our off season. You know, I always feel like you're kind of known for like what you've done, and you know, we were pretty aggressive early on trying to address what we felt we had to do, and that was find some innings. And so I think a lot of people anticipate or sort of look at our offseason maybe as it's slow or we didn't really do what we needed to do, but we're pretty excited about where our roster is. You know, you think about where we were on October 1st versus where we are today. We've had a lot of roster turn. We've brought in a lot of new faces. We've been strategic about it because we've been trying to create some depth at our minor league system, but also at our big leagues. As we sit here on January 13th, because there's still some things that could happen, of course. You know, there's learned a long time ago in the offseason, there's no really a finish line until the offseason's over and you start the season. So you know, we're going to keep looking and continue to see if there's ways to improve this club or some additions. And overall, though, we feel good about where we are, but you know, there's always some work to do. So at that, you have to take some questions. Answers no questions.
With the way your roster is currently constructed, what do you think is the portion that you're most excited about?
Well, I think the biggest change from a year ago to where we are today is just the veteran leadership. You know, we've kind of touched on this throughout the off season, but you know, I definitely feel like we didn't really calculate the losing the voices of somebody like Pujols, Molina, and even Waino to some extent being injured for a lot. And I think you know, what we tried to do this offseason was look at people that could carry that voice back or bring it back. And so that's something that we were very focused on. But it's one thing to have a voice, but you also have to still do the job. But I do feel like when you look back over the last 365 days from where we were from a rotation standpoint to where we are today, I think our confidence is much higher.
Well, when you look at what additions might look like, where are you all at from a budget perspective? Do you feel like there's enough room for you still to make additions to the major league roster?
Yeah, I mean, the budget question always comes out, payroll question. But, you know, it's probably not as black and white as people would like to think it is. You know, depending on what the type of investment might look like, it's something that, you know, we can always take to ownership if we feel it's important or a good value. But do I think there's some room in the payroll if we needed to? Yes.
The way you've redone the bullpen, swing and miss, you're going for swing and miss, guys that throw really hard. How do you like the setup, the makeup of your bullpen right now?
Yeah, actually, like on a personal level, my goal is just to get outs. Like, you know, if we get strikeouts, great. I think where our bullpen is, it's stronger. You know, is there something that we can still possibly do? Possibly. I think the big thing too is just to understand, like now that we've added those guys in the rotation, how does that have a trickle-down effect in the bullpen? And so I think obviously we use spring training to determine that and see what that looks like, but we definitely feel like you know, we've added a lot of depth to our pitching.
Mo, you mentioned the guys that are at the front end of that rotation now, the innings that you can get from it. It feels like as Major League Baseball is kind of going with shorter starts, you guys are hoping to get longer starts. What is the benefit of that you guys are hoping to see?
Well, I think would you agree? Last year we had a lot of shorter starts. Right?
Yeah.
So what happens when you have shorter starts? You tend to put a lot more pressure on your bullpen. So there's really two ways to structure your bullpen. You have just a very dynamic bullpen that can tolerate high volume or high use, or you have to create a bullpen that has a ton of flexibility in it, meaning guys with options. So as you start to tire, you can flip out. What we're trying to do is sort of thread that needle. We would like our starters to go deeper, because if we can shorten the game, we now feel like we have a bullpen that can manage that. Last year we just put so much stress on the bullpen really from day one. I don't think we ever really got on track. So as we look at sort of the difference of that, that's what we're hoping to see happen. So yeah, maybe the league as a whole is trying to find ways to shorten starters, but I think like in the end you'll see a trend where starters will try to go deeper.
Mo, and optimistically, what ways is this roster constructed that you see can win in October in the playoff system, the new playoff system?
Well, I definitely feel like in a short series, the types of arms we have, we can then shorten the start, and then kind of just start doing the churn. But I think again, it's someone brought up swing this, someone brings up getting outs, and this is really the part that matters. How you do it, you just have to get the outs, and I think this group is capable of that. When you think about a short series, just imagine maybe someone doesn't actually get to start, but someone can come in the third or fourth or fifth and buy you time.
We've talked over the years about building a team to make the playoffs, and is there a difference between building a team to make it past and building a team to win the championship? If that is setting a needle to you, Fred. Can you describe the strength of your team right now and the goal of your team realistically in 2024?
Well, our goal is always to win, right? But if I come up here and say it differently, that's terrible. But the fact is like you got to get to October before you can worry about winning in October. And I think for us, we feel like we're going to be able to compete in this Central, and expectations are high. So I think when you look at how we played last year, a lot of things didn't go right for us. We're certainly believe in this team. We believe in our everyday club, and a lot of these younger guys that got some experience last year, I think that'll serve them very well in 2024.
Mo, how important was finding a guy like Kittredge in the market, a right-hander with proven kind of leverage experience to add to that bullpen?
It was critical. There's still guys out there in the free agent market that could probably check that box, but this was a deal that we were dealing from our depth, and so to be able to do that, especially somebody that arguably didn't perform in the last 2 years, but was really good in 2021. I think the unique thing about him is he's coming from the Tampa system, so like he understands how he might be used, and so he's not someone that's going to be like ninth inning or nothing kind of thinking. And I believe in 2021 he actually pitched in all 11 innings, which is such a unique thing, right? So that means he was used as an opener, but then he closed a few games. And so that's pretty remarkable to have that on your resume. So I just think he's going to give us a lot of flexibility on how we think about using him, and we do think there's a lot of upside in that arm.
Mo, speaking of Kittredge and the Rays organization, you recently brought on Heimblum as an advisor, and Kittredge, Robertson, Fernandez, O'Brien all have connections to him. Did Heimblum play a role in the acquisitions this offseason so far, and how do you envision his influence in future acquisitions?
I would say that I would bounce these acquisitions off of him, just because he had that dotted line connection. Now, some of them, he remembered better than others, but certainly if you have a resource, you should tap into it, and that's what we did. In terms of how I see him being used moving forward, obviously his title is going to be used in an advisory role, but as you can imagine, trying to think about how we want this organization to look in the next few years, having him help us sort of have a better understanding, how do we look relative to industry? When you think about someone that's had experience in Tampa, you think about someone who oversaw baseball operations for Boston, it's a pretty unique resume, and to be able to have someone like that join us, I think is going to be a huge asset for us as we try to understand really where are we.
Well, when we talked to you in Florida last spring, when you signed your extension, you were pretty clear that your hope was to sort of step back, wind down by the end of 25 in terms of your operational responsibilities. Is that still a path that you think for you makes the most sense?
I would imagine that's going to stay pretty true. I mean, I don't want to sit up here today on January 13th and retire, but I think having a succession plan and then coupling some of the things that I've been involved in at such a high level. I think I'm starting my 17th season in the seat, so it's probably, you know, reasonably to think that having a different voice at some point would make a lot of sense. And so as I think about where the organization is and where we need to go, you know, Bill and I have had a lot of discussions on what we want to see that look like. And so, you know, a lot of people are sort of jumping to conclusions with the Heim hire, but I would say that at the very least, it strengthens our bench, at the very least. And where it leads to, we will see. But you know, we have a lot of capable people in our front office. Obviously, Mike is just someone that's well thought of in the industry. You know, Randy Flores is a riser. So, you know, I feel pretty good about where the organization is, but there's also some things that are going to change over time, and I just want to make sure we're positioned in that way.
Mo, you mentioned
Spokesman for the teams really a lot since the pandemic. That's kind of where, I know before that too. Can you imagine that changing then as some of these guys, you know, there's a panel that involves Gersh and Laura and maybe Wayne on it as well, Gary. Do you imagine over the next 2 years that might change a little? If their profile might become more prominent?
Hard to say. You know, obviously, if we determine what the succession plan looks like, that might be a good strategy. I don't want to sound like I'm a control freak, but I do think like messaging and how you position things is critical to the success of a franchise. So I do think having like one voice from this side of things is helpful.
Mo, you mentioned that.
The amount of time that you've been doing this and all these winter warms you've come to, do you still get a kick out of seeing a player be introduced to Cardinals all of this for the first time? Like Sonny Gray, I know you had your eye on for a long time over the years. Are you looking forward to seeing him get a taste of what this is like this weekend?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was up in my office before coming here, and he was being escorted over to Ballpark Village, and he was with his kids, his wife, and I was thinking, like, it's got to be pretty cool for him. Because again, like, just walk around here, and it is a fun little vibe. And granted, it's 20 degrees, but no one's complaining. People are enjoying it. And I think, like, you know, I was over at Ballpark Village earlier this morning and ran into Kyle Gibson. And he's like, you know, this is kind of what makes this place special. And as you guys all know, you cover our team, but what makes this place special is 3 million fans, right? And being able to play in front of good crowds and passionate fans. And that's what makes this place awesome.
You're clearly thinking about the future when you're talking about it. You know, was he a player that you kind of said, I want to see what he does for the Cardinals before it's too late? I mean, are there players
Back
like
to
that?
Sonny?
Yeah, are there players like that that you really say, if there's ever going to be a chance, this has to be it?
Definitely probably had to be it, you know, especially if you're trying to capture some upside. But like, I feel like there are times where you have like this connection to a player that does go back a long time, and you know, we were really hopeful that we would get him in that draft. You know, unfortunately it didn't work out, but now to reunite, I think it's pretty cool. But you know, I think the one thing, and we've touched on this earlier in the offseason, but all these guys wanted to be here. And Sonny, Lance, and Gibby, that's what they want. And I think guys that want to be here tend to get a high rate of return.
Well, you've seen organizations.
What do you expect the reaction to be, and how do you think that their commitment will get tested by last year's?
So I don't understand your question.
What do you expect your reception? You mentioned fans and how they are what makes.
Oh, so you think I'm going to get booed?
You were booed. I mean,
Yeah.
to put a point on it, so that you have your new bar joke lined up.
Yeah, I do. I couldn't need that. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough business, right? Had a lot of success here. One bad year, and it's thrown out. Yeah, hopefully we rebound.
Well, what's your theory on some teams of the Braves locking up their young core? You've got a young core kind of coming. The Braves, you know, acted proactively, tried to lock up those guys for the long term. Is that something you've studied or believe in or are interested in?
Well, I think if you study us, you'll know we have a history of doing that. You know, currently we haven't been able to do that, but I wouldn't say that that's not something we would discuss with some of our young players.
Mhm.
Yes, we'd be interested in that if it made sense on both sides.
the opposite end of that is Paul Goldschmidt, who will be a free agent after this coming season. Is extending him a priority for you from the organization's perspective?
I think right now, I think everybody just wants to see how the season starts. Obviously, we want to get off on the right track, and then we can address things like that. So,
Is that team-wide, all, I mean, is that?
well,
Well, your off-season acquisitions have been pretty pitching heavy, obviously, besides the need for pitching. Is that also a testament to how you feel about the position playing forward of your club?
yeah, I think. Look, I definitely think we could have made trades with some of our position players because they were asked about a lot. But in the end, we just felt like it's a good young group and we want to keep this together. And we're pretty excited about it.
Well, this might be the best group of left-handed backs that you guys have had just in totality in a while in the big league club. What do you guys see as the value in having the quantity of options from the left side?
Well, I think the good news is a lot of these guys can play different spots on the infield and the outfield, and so just that flexibility I think is important. I mean, obviously you're going to have to make sure you get everyday playing time and figure out ways to get at bats, but I think having that depth gives us a strength.
On that point, Mo, you mentioned you're going to center fielder Tommy Edman. Is he also your reserve shortstop?
I would definitely say he's insurance for that at the moment, yeah, for sure. But, we're pretty bullish on where Wynn is. And I think, like, when you look at kind of his history, usually gets off to a slow start and sort of meets the league over time. Now, a small window last year to try to see what this league was about. Obviously had some struggles offensively, but we believe that having that ability to get him up to the big leagues last year is going to help him in 2024.
Mo, you let, I think you told, well, maybe not Johnny, that Tommy had wrist surgery. Was there a reason that wasn't disclosed before when you were asked multiple times?
I don't recall being asked, and I probably just forgot. I mean, it was pretty benign. But if you had asked just a general question of who had surgery, I probably just forgot. I wasn't trying to hide it.
How's he doing? How's Tommy's status?
Seems like he's doing great.
Anybody beside Tommy have to have the season after the season?
But now I'm going to look at the roster.
Yeah.
Try to make a mistake. Got some music going on.
Jeopardy music?
Something new.
I feel like I should sing.
I don't think so. Nothing's jumping out.
Well, not that this would be postseason injury related, but going back to the season, how are the progress with Dylan Carlson and Brendan Donovan as far as looking ahead towards spring training? And
Both seem to be in really good spots. Dylan's doing most of his rehab down in Phoenix, and all the feedback we've gotten has been very positive. And then Donovan is actually down in Jupiter, so we have laid eyes on and hands on him, and we're really encouraged where he's at.
Is he limited at all in his throwing, or will he be in the
Spring training, he should be ready to go.
regardless of position?
Mo, you mentioned having confidence in Lynn and the role he can play, but how, with the way your roster is lined up, how important is it that he take hold of that role so that Tommy can stay in center and everything can line up the way you guys are hoping defensively?
Well, I definitely think that makes us the best defensive club. Obviously, Dylan Carlson can play center, so I think we could have some flexibility there. But I do think if Wynn's at short and Tommy's at center, that's probably the strongest defensive club we could have.
Mo,
What do you need offensively from those two? I mean, they're gifted defensive players. So if you put both of them in the lineup, is that enough offense to do something from them?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, Tommy's been some of this hit all over the order before. And then, we do have a belief that, you'll see more offense from Wynn than what you saw last year.
Is that a home base percentage kind of offense?
Yeah, and I just think just more comfortable understanding, your approach and what you do. But when you look at the overall club, you think about it as a pretty offensive-minded team. So I think we have the bandwidth to sort of absorb a little bit if it's a slow start.
Mo, when you were negotiating with Lance Lynn, what were those conversations like with as far as him maybe wanting to bounce back a little bit? He's mentioned that. as far as, you gave up a bunch of home runs last year. He wants to eliminate that. What were your conversations like with him wanting to bounce back and be better?
Well, it's a couple things. One is, that's nice, right? Like I understand he wants to do better, and the key is, do we think there's a path to be better? And so you have your pitching coaches take a look at his video, study a lot of the TrackMan information or Hawkeye, and try to determine can we improve on something? And that's something he was really open-minded to and interested in. Our thoughts on that, but ultimately, he's a real competitor. Been around him. He knows last year did not go the way he had hoped, but. So his off-season training, his preparation, working with our coaches has been very intentional, and I think he's just excited to put the birds on the bat back on, and but he expects to be a positive contributor on this team.
Mo, when it comes to the pitching depth at the upper minor league level, I mean, how confident do you feel in seeing that group contributing at some point in 2024?
Well, I think. I was pretty bullish on that group last year, right? Didn't quite work out as I'd hoped. But my point is, they're a year older, they've experienced some things now, and I think when you look at, speaking of guys like McGreevy and Graceffa, but that group, I think, learned a lot last year. And then I think you couple that with a lot of the players that we acquired at the trading deadline. I mean, clearly, we improved our depth in a lot of ways. Ron was starting games for us last year, and now we're not even discussing him necessarily in our rotation. So I just think that the overall breadth of what you have, especially what potentially could be at Memphis, is a lot stronger than what we were here.
Well, when you
Well,
think
along
about
those lines, do you feel like you guys are in a position where you might be able to strongly consider some of that group as bullpen options as far as the way to transition them to the major leagues and the way they can help the ball?
Of course, and that's what I was referring to earlier. If your starters are good, then someone else isn't starting, and that could transition into the bullpen.
We've always talked about, or recently we talked about, Thompson and Libertor, because we've seen them in those roles. Are there other guys in that group that you feel like may be a good fit for that?
Again, it's all about guys who can get out, right? We've done it in the past where we've taken someone who's a younger, talented player like a Carlos Martinez and put them right in the bullpen at the big leagues. And then eventually we try to get them to start at some point. Trevor Rosenthal was another guy that started that went to the bullpen. So we're always open-minded to that. And as we look at how spring training unfolds, it's definitely something that's in consideration.
when you think about that and you look to what that means for their future progress as a starter, how do you view the innings of, as a reliever, if you're maybe 60, 70 innings this year, how does that impact the potential development as a starter for you guys long term?
Well, I think that's the tricky balance, right? When you take somebody that ends up with 75, 80 innings, and then you're going to put them in the rotation the next year, what's a fair amount of workload that can seem reasonable? Is it double? Is it 2.5? I don't think there's any perfect answer to this, and that's something we're just all trying to navigate. But when you have some of these younger, talented guys, you'd rather them continue to build to what you think their ultimate job will be. But players want to be in the big leagues, so we understand that as well.
Year two for your starting catcher. What do you see this year for your catcher?
He's been very intentional this offseason. Been working really hard. I think he's excited. I think he knows our group a lot better than he did a year ago. And then I think having someone to bounce stuff off of by the name we got here in Lynn, I think is something that he welcomes as well. So, I just feel it's going to be a lot more natural and a little more organic. And I think it's going to be something that, he kind of found himself the second half last year. And, that's what we hope to see for a full season.
Would it help for all 110 starts, 120, or his backup?
Our backup is Ivan Herrera, and I hope he gets to play a little bit. What we don't want to do is go down that path where we did it with a lot with Yachty, where he just absorbs all the games. Herrera is a talented young player, and he needs to be playing with him.
Talking about Yadier Molina, what will be his role as a special advisor?
gonna be like my right-hand man on everything. No, he's gonna be someone that, gets his feet wet. I plan on meeting with him whenever he's done in Puerto Rico, in terms of, kind of getting with him and letting him understand how we think about like player acquisitions, how we value players, and just really giving him an introduction to that side of the business. And then of course, anything he can do to help some of our younger catchers, we're gonna want.
Well, you kind of intentionally left the door open. You kind of left the door open when talking about there might be things out there that pique your interest. You've got time, ability to maybe jump on some things if they. Is that mostly bullpen focused, or could that be rotation focused if the deal is right?
It could be anything. Yeah, not closing the door to anything at this point.
Well, you have Yadi on your staff. How much will he interact with the coaching staff and be a part of that?
I think he's going to want to do that a lot. So my guess is his comfort level is going to be more like towards that side of things. But we definitely know that we want to work on some of the things that we deal with on the front office side. But he wants some exposure.
What's been the tone of the coaching group and the manager this winter, especially coming out of last season? What would you like the manager to kind of learn from this year?
Well, I think there's lots of things that we can take away from last year, and I think we all have to do a little self-reflection on what that looks like. And I think we've all done that internally. But I think the mood of our coaching staff, which I haven't been together with them since the season ended as an entire group, but I think the addition of Dan Descalzo is going to be a really helpful fit for our club. And I think just looking at that working relationship with Ollie and he has been very positive, and we have to witness that at other meetings.
Well, do you all have concerns about whether it's the optics or the reality of having a manager who was going into the last year of his contract and having a franchise legend in the front office who has said many times he wants to manage in the big leagues? Are you concerned about the potential for whether it's friction or whatever else that accompanies that setup?
Not really, but I can understand why it would be a question. Yeah, it could become real. We'll find out. But I don't think entering into this would make sense to approach it that way. Clearly, I'm a big advocate for Ollie. I believe in him, but we also recognize last year was not good, and so we have to make some adjustments. We have to do things differently, and hopefully we do it in a successful manner.
Mo, it's been kind of the backdrop to the offseason for a number of teams. What for you guys was the role of the RSN instability for your offseason plans and the spending that took place?
It really didn't affect us that much. Clearly we're cognizant of it. If there's potential to lose significant dollars, I mean, you guys all work for companies. When your companies start to lose money, what happens? You either downsize or sometimes you see a reduction in staff or something like that. But it's for us, we kind of went into this year knowing that we have to rebound. So we weren't going to look at ways to necessarily try to penalize anything on the operational side. And so, it hasn't had a real adverse effect on us, but it could down the road if we don't right this ship.
Did it have any effect of shorter term deals potentially for you guys?
Really. Again, we chased deals that players really wanted to be here. And that was critical. We wanted to jump the market because we didn't know where the market was going.
Well, when you look at the lineup, if everyone's healthy, can you describe the ceiling, offensive impact in regards to run production?
Well, I think really you're just going to see a more mature lineup than what you saw last year. In the sense that I think there were a lot of growing pains in our lineup last year. There were a lot of injuries. But if we can avoid injuries, I think you're going to see a much more dynamic offense.
Well, we got time for maybe one or two more, and then we've got to get you back over to Ballpark Village.
Mo, you mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You mentioned that everybody in the organization has done a lot of self-reflecting after last year. I remember you mentioning that you had some sleepless nights. What has been the key of your own self-evaluation, your self-reflection from last year?
I imagine this won't come as a surprise to this group, but there's probably a little bit of arrogance when you do something as long as I've done it, and approaching it in that way is not helpful. You have to have a little sense of humility on what can happen, and realizing that it's hard to keep everyone happy, but still trying to be true to how we make decisions and why we make decisions. How we decided to tinker a little bit on how we make decisions yet. Because clearly what we did last year didn't work, and that's part of it. But on a personal level, it's understanding that mistakes do happen.
Katie, did you have one last one?
Just a quick one. I guess it depends on your answer, but we talked a lot about veteran leadership. Nolan Arenado had a down year last year. What does he need to do, and what are you hoping to see to make sure that he returns to form, since he'll be such a critical piece of your club next year?
Yeah, I spoke with Nolan about a week ago, and I think he's in a great headspace. He understands, last year didn't go well for a lot of people, and him included, but he realizes the value he is to this team and the importance he is to this team, and he's been very purposeful in his offseason to get himself prepared, and so physically he feels really good. I think mentally he's in a great headspace, and so he's excited to come in here.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, one more if we can, Mo.
Okay, I want to ask with your outfield, the way you have sort of Lucar and Walker sort of positioned with your corners, and potentially guys could be there for a period of time. What would you like to see as far as a step forward? What do you feel like a step forward for them looks like this season?
Well, I think in Newbar's case, just the ability to show you the full, right? Maybe stay healthy. He's got tremendous upside, tremendous talent. And I think in Walker's case, it's, from a defensive standpoint, we hope he can get to where he's at least league average from a defensive standpoint. We certainly felt like he was trending that way towards the end of last year. He's been spending the month of January working with Jose Oquendo down in Florida, so that's encouraging. But I think it's, as you can imagine, from a offensive side, it's a pretty exciting group. Guys that actually profile out as quarter outfielders that sky can be the limit. So ultimately, that's what you're hoping to see come together.
All right. Well, thank you, Mo.
Thank you, Mo.
Thank you, Mo.